Hello and a very warm welcome to all of you to India Matters on Monday night. On Saturday morning, just hours after the Air India Flight 171 crash preliminary report came out, an expert appeared right here on this channel to suggest that pilot suicide or deliberate action appeared to be the only angle to consider. He said that is what the probe report pointed at. Well, as you can imagine, it led to a huge amount of anger and disbelief. Well, NDTV does not endorse those views, those are of an expert. And that's why on tonight's show, we've invited back Captain Mohan Ranganathan, who said deliberate police action is something he believed was the only thing to be considered in this unfortunate tragedy. And we will be facing him off with 4 pilots who completely disagree with what he said. You don't want to miss that debate. That's coming up in just a few minutes right here on India Matters. But there is something deeply troubling about the way the narrative around AI171's crash has played out, hasn't it, my friends? From the very start, just hours after the tragedy, even before black boxes were recovered, even before there was a single piece of confirmed data from the investigation, you had so many so-called Western aviation experts confidently floating the theory of pilot error. Some even went as far as to suggest it was deliberate, a pilot's suicide, even at that time a month ago. And while back then many dismissed it as premature speculation, here we are more than a month later now, and that same angle is now being pushed again with even greater confidence in light of the preliminary probe report. The fact is, before the interim probe report came out, the pilot's suicide theory was not born of evidence, it was born of impulse. It was born of an instinct to pin the blame where it cannot be contested, on the dead. And now as the crash report is finally out, even though it's preliminary, and the government has made its interim findings public, we find ourselves right back at that same starting point. That same suggestion that the pilots brought the aircraft down deliberately. But there's more. We now know that before the report was made public, the Wall Street Journal already had access to specific details, which raises a very serious and separate question about leaks from the Indian investigation. And I will get to that on tonight's show. But tonight, I also want to ask larger, more urgent questions. Does the probe really point to nothing except deliberate pilot action, as some very credible voices are suggesting? Who benefits from pushing the pilot suicide theory with such certainty? Is pilot suicide or deliberate action a possibility? Everything is a possibility until we have a total amount of certainty. But why is only that angle being pushed? Who benefits from building a case that the pilots were solely responsible, even as the facts on the table are far from conclusive? Scraps of cockpit conversation, no full details of sequence, and tantalizingly incomplete bits of information in the form of an interim report. Let's be clear. We don't yet know what caused the crash. We certainly don't know conclusively. We may never know for sure. Was it mechanical? Was it sabotage? Was it a tragic error? Was it deliberate? Was it suicide? We don't know. But what we do know is this. There are vested interests that have consistently and persistently pushed one angle, an angle that removes liability from everyone except the pilots. An angle that pins it all on the 2 men who cannot speak in their own defense and whose quotes have been used selectively in this interim report. We don't even know what else they said in the cockpit. There is a suggestion that those speaking for the pilots are speaking from emotion and not facts. Well, that's the language of those who want to paint all arguments as sentimental, since that helps discredit any questions about the larger vested interests. And they are very, very large, government-size large. And when you see stories begin to emerge about the psychological profile of the pilots, their family histories, what medications they were on or weren't taking to begin with, you realize this is not just an investigation, this is narrative setting, this is agenda peddling, this is agenda disguised as analysis. On tonight's show, we will speak to experts in aviation, crash investigations and data analysis, those who've been in those very same cockpits. And we will show you just how tenuous the link is between the current crash report and the theory that pilots acted deliberately. And the person who said that, whose views went viral here on NDTV, will face those questions live tonight on NDTV. It is a theory, not a conclusion. It's a possibility, not a fact. And yet it is being pushed as the only version worth accepting. That is what makes this so dangerous. And that is why I've chosen to talk once again about it tonight. But before we get to that, I did want to throw light on something that has troubled me and troubled others, but I want to throw some light on it directly, because this is truly alarming. The Wall Street Journal, one of the most respected global publications based in the United States, reported on the 11th of July at 5:05 a.m. Indian Standard Time, 5:05 a.m. on July the 11th, that Air India probe puts early focus on pilots' actions and planes' fuel switches. Now, there's nothing immediately weird about this, except the fact that the AI171 preliminary report came out almost 44 hours later on July the 12th at 1:13 a.m. 1:13 a.m. the next day, India Standard Time. So 5:05 a.m. on Friday is when the Wall Street Journal reports those details, and 1:30 a.m. on Saturday is when the report actually comes out, which means the time between the Wall Street Journal report and the release of the probe is approximately 20 hours and 8 minutes. Now let's just assume that whoever got this leaked report, or the details from that leaked report, worked on it for about 24 hours. We're being generous and saying 24 hours to work on the report, put together a story. The Wall Street Journal certainly has its processes. That means the time between the Wall Street Journal report and the probe release was a staggering 44 hours and 8 minutes, which leads to some questions that I want to ask that people are not going to like tonight. Question number one: how did the Wall Street Journal get access to an aviation accident investigation bureau probe detail before the release of the report? 44 hours before the release, how did the Wall Street Journal have those details? Number two, can the AAIB explain how US media reported probe details 44 hours before they were made public? Number three, was the report shared with the Federal Aviation Authority of the US or Boeing before its release in India? This is a question that's going to hurt a lot of people, viewer, but I will ask it tonight because the lives of so many people depend on it. Should the AAIB explain how such leaks were possible if this was an airtight investigation? How is it that the Wall Street Journal has details of a fully secure Indian investigation 44 hours before it is made public here in India? Are US interests influencing India's independent Air India crash probe? Is the most troubling question that we can ask tonight. Let's dive straight into the big debate. Is the pilot suicide angle a narrative that is especially being pushed, or is there reason to believe that the preliminary probe report that has been released by the Aviation Accident Investigation Bureau of India points only in that direction, as many seem to suggest? Captain Mohan Ranganathan, whose appearance here on NDTV has become a huge talking point in aviation circles, is with us live today to defend his view. He's a very well-known, well-regarded aviation safety consultant and a former instructor pilot on Boeing aircraft. YN Sharma is CEO, Chimes Aviation. He's with us. He does not agree with Captain Ranganathan. Captain Kishore Chinta is an aviation safety expert. He's chief pilot with Sirius India Airlines Private Limited. And Captain Rakesh Rai is a former Dreamliner pilot with Air India, in fact, until just last year. And Captain M.R. Wadia, founder-president of the Federation of Indian Pilots. So this is the definitive pilots roundtable here on NDTV. Captain Ranganathan, I want to refresh for all of our viewers this evening what you said, and you stand by it as well, but this is just for the record. I'd like to say it once again, that you've said that this particular report shows signs of a pilot-induced crash, that the captain was on medical leave earlier, the captain had a prior medical condition, the report shows some cover-ups, but it looks like deliberate manual selection of those switches that cut off the fuel. The fuel selectors are not of the sliding type. It cannot be done automatically or due to power failure. Fuel switches have to be pulled out manually. So you've basically said absolutely this report points to pilot action or a deliberate move by the pilot or pilots to crash the plane. For the record, Captain Ranganathan, that continues to be your view, sir?
I did not say it is a deliberate act to crash the plane. I said the report points to deliberate manual intervention. It is not, even the FAA report has said there was nothing wrong with the switches today. So the switches can't slide back to cut off. So it has to be pulled out and moved back. So that is possible only with a manual intervention. The report is very wishy-washy in the sense it says one pilot said this and one pilot said that. If they actually put out the full cockpit voice recorder sequence, because it comes every second, and it is not just one line in that takeoff of 1 minute and 32 seconds before the crash. It should have started, even if they want to abbreviate it, it should start from the takeoff when it starts moving. So if you look through the report, it talks of, okay, let me just refresh you on what I saw in the Air India procedure. The captain has his hand on the thrust levers for takeoff until V1. And the first officer has both his hands on the control column. You have a call out for 80 knots for a speed check. Then there's an auto call for V1. And I'm sure for VR, there's a manual call for rotate. I didn't see that in that procedure, which is there in the manual there.
Yes.
And positive rate gear up. Now, if the CVR had indicated there was no positive rate call, then that's a very important call which is missing. That might be the reason why the gear was hanging down even after it lifted off. And it was very clear throughout that sequence of the flight. So if they really came out with the CVR, if there was a positive rate climb from the captain, and what was the response from the first officer,
Yes,
who was the pilot flying, his call would have been gear up. Okay, we don't know if there was. Then after 3 seconds after liftoff, it says one engine moved back. And then a few seconds later, the other engine. The fuel switches do not move back. It is not an electrical fault. It's not a mechanical fault. It has to be deliberately selected.
okay.
So what does it point to? So based on whatever little, it just points to a manual intervention. Now the co-pilot flying, is he going to take his hands off and pull that, or is the captain's hands near because from the thrust lever, he moves his hand out at V1. So it points to that, that's all.
Okay. Captain Chinta, why don't you jump in right now on this pilot suicide angle? The reason I'm saying pilot suicide angle is because in the public mind, deliberate manual action is being interpreted as a depressed pilot. You know, there are all these reports of a depressed pilot. Captain Ranganathan is, referred to, prior medical condition, which has come in the press as well, of someone who was depressed, who deliberately crashed the plane. What do you say to that, Captain Chinta?
Good evening, gentlemen. With due respects to everyone and the esteemed guests on this panel, I find it absolutely absurd to even say that the pilots planned to deliberately turn those off. For the simple reason that even if we go by the paraphrased one sentence in the report, which says that one pilot asked it is indicative of surprise element, that it surprised one pilot and the other pilot, answered that, hey, I didn't do it. So in the cockpit, like Captain Ranganathan very aptly brought out, the report is absolutely silent and very paraphrasing in terms of selective release of information. If there was a timestamp of each event with what happened in the cockpit in terms of warnings, what was the altitude, what was the engine parameters at that time, followed by cockpit voice recorder, cam 1, cam 2, whether the interaction between the pilots, were any ECAM, ECAS warnings picked up, all these would have given us a more clearer picture on if there was any deliberate action. Prima facie, I don't think there was any pilot action per se. Nobody is deliberating on the fact that can these switches be moved uncommanded? Everyone's saying they can only be physically moved. The only reason those switches are recycled is to reset the EEC logic. The electronic engine control logic is reset in case of a dual engine failure to reactivate the start cycle. The igniters and the fuel metering unit, all these logics are reset.
Yeah.
If we go by the theory that it was a suicide, why even touch those switches? Take over controls and just flip the wings over. That's the end of story. I mean, why this theory of just turning off those and wait and then turn them back on? What if the engines picked up? One engine already picked up. If they had probably a few hundred feet more, it would have probably just saved the day and they would have climbed out. So I think we are just jumping the gun, jumping to the conclusions. As the report, as it stands, does not in any way say that those switches moved physically. All that we know is that the throttle quadrant clearly shows that the switches were on. They use paraphrased words like switches transition from run to cutoff and cutoff to on. Does the flight data recorder record on or off position of the switch? No. That is an aspect which nobody seems to be deliberating. I'll leave it to the type qualified pilot to confirm what the flight data recorder actually picks up.
Yeah.
Does it actually pick up the switch position or the signal given to the EECs by the FADEC by these switches?
Captain Ranganathan, you can respond to what Captain Chinta has just said. He says there's absolutely no way this report points to a deliberate action of any kind. We're also seeing at this point of time several different airlines, conducting inspections of their, the locks on those switches at this point of time. It's not been advised by anyone. There was the 2018 advisory that had come out, which was non-mandated as well. But many different airlines are actually conducting those checks at this point of time. In light of what Captain Chinta has said, Captain Ranganathan, go ahead.
See, if it cannot, the report keeps using wrong terms like transition. But they have said that the switch was moved off and then put back. And let me just clarify one thing. For the dual engine relight checklist, it is not meant for a low level. That checklist is meant for if you look at your 787 QRH, the first item, it says both fuel selectors off. It is not one. It says both fuel selectors to off.
Yeah.
The second item, it says press ram air turbine 1 second. And the third item, it says ensure speed to 70 knots. They were about 170 knots there. So to confuse the dual engine failure checklist done there is something that I cannot accept because it clearly mentions both switches off. It doesn't talk of one switch at a time. So I would like the 787 pilot to respond to that.
Okay, let's get Captain Rai. He's a 787 type-rated pilot. He flew the Dreamliners for Air India until last year. Can you answer that question? And what is your stand on what Captain Ranganathan is saying? Captain Rai, go ahead.
Good evening, everyone. The understanding of the systems of the aeroplane depends upon the last aeroplane you flew. Boeing 787 is a very advanced aircraft. Let me start from the beginning. Even if they don't want to publish the RT transcript at this stage, it is difficult to digest that only 2 sentences were spoken in the cockpit. There must have been a whole lot of conversation going on regarding whatever has happened. If you look at the picture, which was published in the report, the aircraft is barely 50 to 80 feet or maybe 100 feet above the ground.
Yeah.
And the RAT is already deployed. That means something has happened right at the time of rotation when the aircraft has just got airborne, that the engines have failed. Now, they have very, casually mentioned the word transition. In these modern aeroplanes, you don't need to cut off the fuel control switch. Everything is transmitted electronically. So even if the fuel switch is in the run position, it can go into the cutoff position without moving the fuel control switch. The fuel can just shut off.
How can it go into that cutoff position, sir? Clarify that. How does it go into the cutoff position if it's not done deliberately?
Electronically.
It can happen electronically?
Yeah, if there is something wrong with the software commands the fuel shut-off valve to close.
That is Captain Ranganathan is shaking his head, but finish your point, then I'll get him to respond.
Yeah, so with the fuel control switch still in run position, the engines can shut down. So the word used is transition. At no stage they have said the fuel control switch was moved to cut off. The inference is only from the statement of the pilot, why did you cut it off? But at no point it is said that the fuel control switch was moved to cut off. It says fuel control was transitioned from run to cut off, and again from cut off to run.
Yeah.
Now let's come to the timeline. The report does not talk about the timeline when the RAT was deployed, number one. The report does not talk about the timeline when the sentence was spoken. And that's a very important point. This sentence may have been spoken at a time when they were trying to attempt to relight the engine.
Yeah.
So the other pilot may have asked, did you cut it off? He said, no. Then the fuel control switch was cut off and put back to run. Now, coming to the QRH, which Captain Ranganathan just mentioned, this procedure of cutting off the fuel control switch and putting it back to run in a dual engine failure is not only for higher altitudes. The flight crew training manual very clearly states that irrespective of your altitude and airspeed, this is the procedure to be carried out. And in one of the previous shows, I had read out the excerpts of the flight crew training manual. So the pilots, in switching off the fuel control switch and putting it back to run, is exactly as per the Boeing manual.
Okay.
And in my opinion, the fuel control switch was found to be in the run position after the crash. The pilots have taken correct action as mentioned in the flight crew training manual and the QRH. Now, both the switches need not be moved to cut off together. It has to be one by one. One pilot is flying and the other pilot is cutting off the fuel control switch and putting it to run, and then he will do it with the other engine, put it to run. He will not put both his hands over there and put it to cut off and back to run. So it has to be one by one. So in my opinion, till the time the full transcript of the cockpit voice recorder is not published, we are not in a position to say exactly what happened.
Okay.
Now let's come to another point. If the pilot had done it deliberately, then there must have been solid argument in the cockpit. Other pilot will not keep quiet. Right? There must have been solid argument in the cockpit. Why did you do it? And you're going to kill all of us and all that.
No, you're right. And that's a point that that Captain Chinta also raised, which is, that we've got this one line of conversation that has been established in this report. Captain Ranganathan, you've heard from...
I have not finished.
Okay. Finish, sir.
When the engines fail, At that critical moment, when the co-pilot was flying, not very experienced compared to the captain, and when he rotates and he finds all sorts of warnings coming in the cockpit, ICAS, 50 of them must be there, whole lot of them. It's a very confusing thing for a inexperienced mind, lesser experienced mind. It'll take him one hell of a time to decipher as to what has gone wrong with so many messages coming on the ICAS. So the workload definitely increases. And another point, when the two engines fail, the gear cannot be raised.
Okay.
The gear will not go up. So if both the engines have failed, even if the pilot tried to raise the gear, it will not go up.
Okay, let me bring in Captain Ranganathan once again on that. You've heard a comprehensive view, sir, from a Dreamliner pilot who says it's very possible that this movement could have been non-deliberate, software or electrically related. And you've heard everything he just said. What would you like to say to that, sir?
Okay. About the checklist for the dual engine failure, he says, like, to move the two switches, you don't need two hands. You can hold both the switches, pull them out and move. Now, secondly...
No, I don't agree with that. That cannot be done.
And
go ahead.
The other thing is, there was if you look at the report, there's a 10-second difference between moving the one switch to run and the other one. It is to be done together, or maybe if you allow one at a time, it's 2 seconds, but it doesn't take 10 seconds to move the other one. So, and the most important, like you said, there may be hundreds of warnings in the cockpit which could have overwhelmed the first officer. But then, I don't know what is the procedure that Air India follows. If there is a major emergency, even if you're given the flying to a first officer, there should have been a call, my controls, and he should have taken over. So we have the...
See, let's not get into that. The cockpit conversation, has not been published.
I'm just giving you an explanation. But what is important, like everyone agrees, they have to give the entire CVR transcript.
Which we don't have.
Which we don't have. Just this one-liner is causing, just like, this image which is there in page 14.
Yeah.
Which shows the gear down and the rat is down. Now, this was not required with the CVR or the DFDR. It was there with the airport people on the day of the crash.
So
if they had published that on the very first day, all this discussion about rat and gear would not have been there.
I'm almost out of time. I have time for some closing remarks.
I have a very important point to make.
30 seconds, sir. 30 seconds, please.
See, the last aeroplane which a person has flown, the habit interference of that comes into carrying out analysis. Like, I have flown 737s. The fuel control switch in 737, both of them can be moved with one hand because they are a lever type. Whereas in 787, the fuel control switches are knobs. How can you operate both the knobs together? You cannot. It has to be one by one.
Do you agree with what Captain Ranganathan says, Captain Wadia, that the report points to deliberate manual action?
No, I don't agree at all. The only small point I would agree with him is to why isn't the whole voice recorder made public, etc. If the voice recorder is made public, we'll get to know far more. But I do not agree at all with his idea of what could have happened or why it's happened. There is no evidence to show what has happened. And I'll go by the evidence only so far. First of all, as the aircraft is about to take off, the power, everything is fine. There's enough power and enough speed to get the aircraft airborne. However, as he rightly pointed out, the first call is positive rate of climb, gear up. Now, that is a normal call, and I presume who was supposed to call, the pilots have called that thing. But why hasn't the gear gone up? We have seen in the videos that the gear is down. The reason for this is in the squat switch. All aircrafts today, whether it's Boeing or Airbuses, have something called the squat switch, which identifies the aircraft if it's on the ground or in the air. Just to give you, in layman's terms, for people to understand what the squat switch is all about, If the oleo is compressed and the aircraft is on the ground, even if you by mistake put the undercarriage lever up, the lever will not go up, the undercarriage will not go up, because the SWAT switch is indicating to all the computers in the aircraft that the aircraft is on the ground, and if you put the gear goes up, the aircraft will get damaged. So you cannot put the gear up or on the ground. So the SWAT switch is something that gives you a very clear idea why the gear is left down. Also, along with that, if you see another correlated evidence, which is the RAT, which has been deployed. Now, the RAT will get deployed if the power has failed. And what does the RAT do? It only gives you additional electrical power and hydraulic power for supplementary. It won't give you power for taking off and engine power. It's just a supplementary power for indications. So both these evidences, which are actually available to us on so far, indicate that there is no, why would you like to presume that the pilot has tried to commit suicide or put the switches off on his own? Unless there's evidence to prove that, I will certainly not like to believe that at all.
Okay.
It is not likely to happen.
So, Captain Wadia, you're saying that the report is not indicative, it does not point in that direction solely. There are other options available as well. Captain Ranganathan, I'll give you a chance to respond. Let me get YN Sharma in as well, and then I'll get you to respond to both. YN Sharma, what is your view? Do you think this report points to deliberate action? The insinuation being made is that this was a deliberate act. Captain Ranganathan says nowhere has he said that this was a deliberate, move by the pilots to crash the plane, but this is widely being interpreted as pilot suicide, and it's become an emotive issue. What is your response, YN Sharma?
Exactly this. I was on the same panel with Captain Ranganathan when this thing was said earlier. And very simply, I had said at that time also that the only thing which you're getting from the report is that conclusively the report is saying that the action of both the switches moving from run to fuel, cutoff is a deliberate action. It can, if there's a software issue and the fuel supply is cut off at the back, I can understand that, but that is not going to physically move the switch. For that, you need a hand which is going to move that switch. So I said that, it brings up an uncomfortable question. It needs to be investigated ahead of that what prompted that action. Okay, I stopped right there. I am not going ahead and already drawing a conclusion that it was the deliberate act by a pilot to bring the aircraft down on the ground. I'm saying that yes, one thing is we don't believe the report. That's a separate, conversation totally. If we are to believe what the FDR, the information which has been put out in the public domain, it says that at so and so time after takeoff, those switches were moved to the cutoff position.
Yeah.
Right. And then it says 10 seconds later or 14 seconds later, those switches were again put back on the run position. But that was literally about 14 seconds or 12 seconds before the aircraft, impacted with the ground. After those things were put back on the run position, 7 seconds after that, the pilot gave a mayday call, and 8 seconds after that, the aircraft actually impacted with the ground. Which means those switches were put in the run position, and the pilot saw that the spooling up of the engines is not happening. He's still thinking. He can see that aircraft is about to crash. He gives a mayday call.
Okay.
And then the unfortunate occurrence happens. Now, as I said, one thing is we say, oh, this is a cover-up and this thing, and we debunk the complete report. One thing, it's a preliminary report. This is not the full report.
Yeah.
What we are expecting is, at this time only, we should have had a full disclosure. The full CVR should have been out. The full, FDR data should have been out there in the public domain. Is that how it happens?
Captain Ranganathan.
So we are,
I'll come back to you. I'll come back to you, Mr. Sharma. Yeah.
On something which is still just, preliminary, you have these many data points.
Yes, absolutely.
And these many data points are raising this question.
Yeah, Captain
That
Ranganathan.
who put the switches to the cutoff.
Captain Ranganathan, respond to what Captain Wadia said first.
Okay. Now, he was talking about the squad switches. I'd like to know, because I'm not very familiar with the 787 procedure. There are two things which are required. The squad switch and also a radio altimeter height of 10 feet. So once it goes past radio altimeter of 10 feet, it can go into air mode. I don't know whether the 787 has that because the 737s have that. So if you have the aircraft was more than 10 feet when all this was happening, so it should have been active for air mode to take the gear up.
Captain Wadia, do you want to just quickly clarify that? Then I'll bring in the other two guests.
Yes. See, first of all, let me just clarify about the switches. First of all, these are manual switches which are double protected.
Yeah.
So unless, as they pointed out earlier, you make a physical attempt, the switches cannot go. And even the report has not said that the switches were put to off. Let me clarify about the switches now. Was it been touched later on? Yes, they have been touched. But when? When the pilot did not get the power within 5 seconds or so immediately after takeoff, and he asked the other one, have you put it off? He said, no, I have not touched it. So obviously, go by their word. It has not been touched. Switches have not been touched at all. But what is the normal procedure now? If the engines have flamed out, it's a normal procedure for the pilot to go and put the switches off momentarily and put it on immediately again. And that is indicated again by the report on the interim report, that there was initial ignition on one engine, but the other engine didn't have time to get ignited. So I am going purely by the evidence, which gives me no indication that the pilot has done something wrong at all. To my opinion, the pilot has done everything correctly and has not made a single mistake throughout this flight.
Okay, so we have two opposite views here. Captain Ranganathan says deliberate manual action. Captain Wadia says whatever action was taken was corrective and that something else happened which we are not clear about. But whatever actions were taken in the cockpit were corrective actions. Now, whether it was mechanical, technical, we don't know yet because the preliminary report does not throw light on that. Captain Chinta, it's going to be a while till we wait. Mr. Sharma, I'll give you the last word. Captain Chinta, a final word from you. The final report, we don't know when that's going to be out. What thoughts would you like to leave us with? Because the public is still grappling with this idea of pilot suicide versus mechanical fault. Final word.
Even the deliberation that the pilots did something is great disservice to the pilots who are not around anymore to defend themselves and to the families who lost their loved ones. What we need to simply understand is, whom does this narrative benefit? Does it benefit the Indian aviation community, the regulator, or does it benefit the manufacturer? Who is the major stakeholder? That will answer all your questions. Why this narrative is being pushed through by the Western media and where the money is. It benefits the insurers, by putting it on the pilots. There is no liability on the manufacturer. There is no liability on the airline operator. That answers a whole lot of theories why this narrative is being pushed.
And I want to just remind all of our viewers before I give the last word to Vayan Sharma that NDTV is the only channel, and I say this with pride, that is highlighting the fact, gentlemen, that the Wall Street Journal was reporting specifics from the report 44 hours before the report was published. 44 hours before the report was published, the Wall Street Journal,
did they get that information?
Wall Street Journal was putting out specifics from that report. Was the report sent abroad? Was it vetted by, the Trump administration? We don't know. We can only speculate like most other things. But I think it's an important question to ask. Vayan Sharma, final word, out of time.
Yeah. So, again, what we've done right now is that you have a report which has given you some data points.
Yeah.
Right. Reacting to that is one thing. What we are doing is we are speculating on the stuff which we are saying they've not told us. Okay. Repeatedly, this has been said, it's a preliminary report in which they've given for reason best known. And that I also agree, we can argue it till the cows come home, that how transparent at this stage the inquiry, data, sharing of information should be. Now, coming to the point which, the Dreamliner captain was making, that you need, you need both hands for, no, you don't. You move one switch, and if you see the timeline, you have the report with you. It shows one switch moved from run to close. The second one moved 2 seconds later. And that is the time it takes for a person's hand to move from 1 to 3 inches away.
I'm sorry, it doesn't say that. I'm sorry, it doesn't say that.
We are reading the different.
No. It says transition. It says transition. It doesn't say that.
Now we are talking transition.
Okay.
It says transition.
I'm talking about
See,
that's it. Now we'll get.
it says transition,
right?
And there is no way you can hold both the knobs together. There is no way. There is no way you can hold both the knobs together.
Should have used
Please believe me, I have flown the aeroplane. There is no way you can hold both the knobs together. Impossible.
Okay, I'm out of time.
And then
10 seconds.
The other part is that whenever you have this thing, when the relighting is there, obviously that's also recorded that after these many seconds, those switches were put on run position.
Okay.
That's also recorded. And if
So
it would have been
they were put on run position because that's the procedure. You
if
cut
it
off
was a software
put it back
issue,
again.
if it was a software
That is why they
issue,
were put on
captain
position.
would have called. Sir, if it was a software issue, then the captain would have called fuel starvation. He would not ask the second one, why have you put the switches down? Which is a visual confirmation that those switches are down.
I
Think
don't
about
agree
it.
because the timeline of the
switches were
sentence
down.
spoken is not given.
The report only says you cut off.
Timeline of the sentence is not given.
It could be
You have to
anything.
understand that.
Sir, it's an emotional thing. I understand that.
It is not
And
emotional.
again, nobody
it is not
saying
emotional at all.
it
It is
is
not
too
emotional
early.
at all.
It is
If the
too early to
timeline
say
for
that it is
if
the
the
pilot's
timeline
fault.
for that sentence spoken was given, it was
Let me
understandable.
repeatedly say, it is too early to put this on the
All of
pilot's
us are
door.
saying that. All of us
we
are
That's where
saying
we
that.
should leave it. That's where we
That
should
All of
leave
us
it.
are saying
data
that.
points which are there are raising an uncomfortable
But let's not
question
let's
which
not
needs
let's
to be
not
addressed.
get a narrative that pilots switched it off. The fuel control
Who
switch
has
was not
started
put
the
cut off.
narrative?
It is just transition. The word is transition.
Gentlemen, I'm
Not
out of
clear.
time. I'm out of time. I respectfully need to bring this debate to a close. I know that all of you are incredible professionals. So there is no question of facing you off against each other. We only wanted all the expert views here. All of you are experts in your own right. It's an emotional issue, as Vayan Sharma correctly said, and we are right to feel emotional about it. And as we grapple with these facts, there is every hope that the gaps will be filled and we will get more information before making any conclusions, because the conclusions are difficult to digest no matter which way we look at this. Thank you, gentlemen.
And therefore, do not blame the pilots unless you have evidence. Do not blame
I
the
agree.
pilots at all.
I agree, sir. I agree. Thank you very much for being here.
I've flown with Captain Wadia as his co-pilot many times.
Thank you very much. Thanks for being with us on this.